statistics and some other information to District 4. Major Foley, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and appreciate everybody being here. I hope everyone had a safe and happy Thanksgiving season, and we're getting ready to launch into Christmas here. So you have about 14 days left. You better get your shopping done fast. I am very pleased to let you know that COVID does have some positive effects, a little unusual, with the COVID impacts on our retail establishments, with more retail business being done by pickup and things like that. We've been able to take some of our resources that we would normally apply to, for example, Black Friday sales and things like that, and move them out into our divisions to be able to address some of the more pressing issues. We're very, very pleased to say that at least for now, we're about 6% down in overall crime for your area. So for District 4, that's a very significant piece for us. Our crime issue that we continue to face really is surrounding aggravated assaults. And by that, I mean people that, as Chief Jennings has referred to very, very commonly throughout his tenure so far as chief, people are resorting to firearms as a way to settle conflicts. Conflict resolution, especially in our younger people, is not a skill set that we see very often. And so people are much more inclined to resort to gun violence to settle those kinds of issues. That said, our shootings that we have, for the most part, fortunately, don't have the victimization rate that we would normally see. So we're not seeing people that are getting hurt, but people are still shooting. So that said, with our assaults that we have, people who are shooting into homes, shooting into cars, things of that nature, road rage incidents, we have seen increased levels of that kind of activity. I will say that we have been very lucky with our detectives and the work that we have with our real-time crime center to be able to make arrests. And we've made some significant arrests here in the last few weeks. And we're up to 14 cases cleared by arrest this month. So that is a really testament to the work that's being done by our officers and our detectives on the street. From a property crime perspective, really the biggest issue that we have right now are vehicle break-ins. And that continues to be something that is very, very, very easy to stop if people would do a couple of things. Don't leave any kind of valuables in your car. Make sure that you lock your vehicle. If you're a firearm owner, never, ever leave a firearm in a vehicle. Those three things right there would eliminate a huge portion of these vehicle break-ins that we have. So that said, our plan going into December is to make sure that we are really concentrating on our hotspots, our traditional areas where we see violent crime, some of the corridors that the councilperson referred to just a moment ago, Sherwood Creek and 85 area. Those zones where we traditionally see that kind of violent crime is where we're really pushing our resources. We've been effective, and we've had a lot of partnerships with our commercial entities out there to work with them. For example, we have a Circle K on University City Boulevard that's had some issues, and we've reached out to their corporate management to talk to them. Typically, we see something like a shoplifting where somebody steals beer and the clerk tries to stop that person from stealing that beer, and then that person threatens the clerk or produces a weapon and says, well, I'm taking this anyway. So we're working with them on mitigation efforts to make sure that they understand how they can stop that from becoming a much more aggressive incident. And we think we're having some success there. You also asked me to talk about some of the street racing issues that we've had. So I'd like to talk about that if that's all right with you. So CMPD and other law enforcement partners, to include Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department, the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, have been working for about the last 30 days to address complaints that we've seen across Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Many of those have been in District 4. Specifically around the Prosperity Church area, also around I-485, with people who are taking their vehicles out on the street. They are revving their engines, they're being too loud, they're burning their tires, and then unfortunately they also go out and they race on our interstates, all of which are very dangerous things. We've worked very hard. We've done a number of operations cumulatively since I would say since this began and up until the end of last month, beginning of December. So far, we've conducted about 1,700 traffic stops. That's a significant number of stops. We have issued a large number of citations. We're probably pushing 1,000 or more citations now. And then the majority of those are related to speed violations, reckless driving, and vehicle registration and licensing violations. So just looking at my totals here, We are looking at now close to 2,600 total violations that CMPD has enforced on the roads. And again, the goal here is safety. We want to make sure everybody is safe. And especially for people who are traveling during the holidays, commuting to and from work, we want to make sure that they're safe. And at night, when people don't have the expectation of having somebody flying by them at high speed, we want to make sure that we're out there, we are visible, we have a presence, and we enforce that law.
Thank you so much for the update.
Yes.
Thank you for the information regarding the arrests being up, the effective mitigation and prevention, and the focus on safety and prevention in this district and also the city. And I'd also like to take some time to publicly thank you and all of our police force for the work and the sacrifice that you make on a daily basis. So thank you. I want to ensure that you know that you have my support along with City Council and the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. That's much appreciated. And for those who are listening, we are doing a question and answer at the end of the session. So I will be available to hopefully answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Next on the agenda, I have our Assistant City Manager, Taiwo Dahova, and he's going to talk about the corridors of opportunity and the mobility plan.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry if I turn on my video for some reason, it affects my audio and therefore crashes. So I'll try and be careful. But thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you, Major. That actually sets me up nicely, especially when we get to the corridors of opportunity. But safety is so important to our community. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're pushing in our comprehensive plan is creating safe and equitable mobility, which is really what I want to talk about as part of the transformational mobility network. And then I'll focus on West Sugar Creek and I-85, like Major said. So let's start with the Charlotte Most. Once again, my name is Taiwo Dahova with the city, Assistant City Manager and Director of Planning. And a while back, a few months ago, Mayor Lyles and Council formed this 25-member task force chaired by former Mayor Harvey Gantt to look at all the adopted plans that we have in the city related to transportation and to see how we can come up with what we call a transformational mobility network that will integrate different modes of transportation and then develop a funding strategy for how we're going to implement it over the next several years. And I will talk about this, and then I will lean into the corridors of opportunity work that we're doing right now. So while this is a long-term effort, the next one that I will talk about with regards to corridors is a short-term effort. So again, like I said, it's transformational mobility network, and you all know that Charlotte is growing really fast. Our population right now is 887,000. It is 872,000 people. When I first came to Charlotte, we were the 17th largest city in the country. That was only about 5 years ago. About 2 years ago, we became the 16th largest city in the country by population. And just last year, this year, we became the 15th largest city in the country, again by population, but the 5th fastest growing city in the country and the fastest growing city on the East Coast. So obviously, we're growing very well. I was looking at reading an article by Wall Street Journal today that 5 cities are actually getting the bulk of population growth and movement in the country right now: Charlotte, Sacramento, Austin, Salt Lake, and Phoenix. Because people who are moving away from New York, who are moving away from Chicago, Seattle, all those big cities, are moving into these 5 cities. We will continue to see that happen. And as people move here, our changing needs are growing. We're number 1 in the country for baby boomers. We're also top 5 in the country for millennials. And as people come from these other cities, they expect to see a form of transportation that's not just one mode, but is able to move them in different directions. One thing Charlotte has done very well is our investment in light rail. In fact, when you talk about transit, people often think you're talking about light rail. But the fact is that most people who will use our transit system today, 80%, will use the bus system. But we want it to go beyond just rail and bus. We want to invest in bicycle ways, in green ways, in pedestrian activities, and also improve our roadways. I will go through this one by one. So if you could go to the next slide, talks about rapid transit. We are all familiar with our blue line. which is what we have in the longest purple line there, that the longest purple line there is actually going all the way to the university as the blue line extension. But the ones that are hatched are the ones that we are actually working on right now. We are going to extend the blue line to Valentine in the future. We're going to also do the silver line from Matthews all the way to the airport area, and then extend the gold line from Beresford Road to Eastland Mall, and then also extend the red line to North Mecklenburg. If we can invest in that, that will give us approximately over 100 miles of new rail system, as well as both rapid transit system. Next slide talks about our investment in bus, but it's not just about building those bus priority lanes like we have on Central Avenue, but also improving the frequencies of these services. Right now, the average frequency, that is the time intervals between two buses, could be about 30 to 45 minutes. Nobody wants to take a line where they have to wait for 60 minutes to get on the next one. And so we want to improve this to be able to be, to reduce that intervals to about 15 minutes. And so as we build out that network, we're able to serve more people in different parts of the community. Next slide, it's about the Greenway system. Some of you are familiar with the Cross Charlotte Trail, but as we build this out, it's really about connecting every part of our community, including the county, with a trail system that's aligned with our rail system as well in some places, but in some other places aligned with our bus system. And so it's really about getting people to where they need to get to, because there are people who may not be able to use public transit. Rail isn't going to go everywhere. Bus services will not be able to go everywhere to every neighborhood. But how can we make sure that we connect everybody wherever they are with different modes of transportation? The next one is the bicycle network. We don't have a whole lot of it right now. Again, it's about creating safe and equitable mobility. So next slide, please. The next slide shows you our bicycle network right now. Now, everything that you see in blue is where we intend to be able to invest in. What we have in dark blue actually are existing, but can also be built out. And so if we were to build those out along with our Greenway, we're connecting a whole lot more people in our community. The next one is about pedestrian walkway. I know that Councilmember Johnson talks a lot about first and last mile. We have a lot of gaps in our sidewalks, and somehow that's how people on wheelchairs or people who do not have access to any means of transportation are able to get anywhere. How can we build this out in such a way that it can connect people safely again, and people, whether they are visually impaired or physically disabled, will feel safe being able to connect to wherever they want to go. And the last mode is our roadway. People are still going to be able to, are still going to drive, right? I mean, we may never be able to get rid of automobiles, but when people do it, how can they do it in a safe way? So those areas where you see in light blue, those are the areas where we have the highest congestions, the University City area, the South Charlotte area, and Steel Creek area. As we invest in this transformational mobility network, those areas become priority as to how can we manage congestions in those areas. Obviously, for something this beautiful and this wonderful and this transformational is going to cost a lot of money. We estimate that this is going to cost about $8 to $12 billion to build out over the next 10 to 15 years, but also to finance it over a 30-year period. But we know that partnership from federal government and state government in the past have helped us. So we're looking at the local portion, which will be about 50% of that. And to be able to do that, we would need a new source of transit sales tax or mobility sales tax, to call it, that will help us to achieve that goal. So the last slide on this subject is what the task force will be recommending to our council. They wrapped up their work on December 3rd. They will be making recommendations to our council on December 14th, next Monday. And those recommendations will focus around investing in this transformational mobility network, making sure that we're transparent with the process, communicating the program, holding ourselves accountable, perhaps also talking about how we're going to pay for it, and then get into a referendum in the fall of 2021. It means we're able to do more. It also means we're able to provide accessibility to a lot of people because we have issues with upward mobility. It can get people closer to jobs. It can get people closer to affordable housing. It can also help people to be able to get to amenities and grocery stores in a seamless fashion. If we are able to get the support of the community, of the state, and of the federal government to help us make this happen. So if you will be listening in on Monday, December 14th, Mayor Harvey Gantt and myself will be presenting the task force final report to Councilmember Johnson and our colleagues on City Council. That takes me to our next subject, which is corridors of opportunity. I'll go through the next few slides and then I will, at the end again, wait if there's any question. So this last January, just like Council focused on mobility, accessibility, and connectivity, they wanted to make their priority also in investing in vulnerable communities, especially areas that have not really had a lot of investment in the past. And so we decided we were going to look at 6 corridors that fit this category, such as Beresford Road, West Boulevard, Sugar Creek, West Sugar Creek I-85, Central Ave Mall, Freedom Drive, Wilkinson, Graham Street, and North Prime. Over that, to invest in this, it's about $24.5 million. Now, we are not going to equally divide that amount between the 6 corridors because every corridor has its different challenges. So over the last few months, once the money was released, July of this year, the start of the budget year, we started to work on 2 corridors, Beresford Road and West Boulevard. We've been able to move forward as of today with those 2 corridors in terms of what we're going to do. The next focus is now going to be on West Sugar Creek and I-85. But our goal is to make sure that it's not just about economic development or placemaking or creating a safe environment or even housing, but everything together. So we're treating it as a system. Because when you treat it as a system, it means I can support CMPD in what they're doing. It means I can support economic development in what they're doing. It means we can support housing. We can support Department of Transportation in the work that they're doing. So it's really a holistic approach to creating communities, in our city. The next slide talks about the type of approach that we're taking. In the past, we've done this differently. Either we will say, oh yeah, let's go to that corridor and fix anything related to jobs, or let's go to that corridor and fix anything related to housing. But this time, that's not what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that we respect, value, and appreciate the work that the community has done in their communities along those corridors, first of all, and other plans that have been adopted and that have been done in those areas. What makes West Sugar Creek a little bit different, next slide, is that there is no adopted plan for West Sugar Creek many years. So what we've done over the last, few months prior to COVID-19 was to spend some time with a segment of the community and do what we call design sprints. The idea behind that is to identify what are the current conditions there? What are the things that we need to be doing? We have a high concentration, for example, of hotels. At the intersection of 85 and West Sugar Creek, there are about 13 hotels. We understand that. That makes this particular area unique. What are the businesses and infrastructures? What are they like? They're mostly auto-oriented. And how can we help to make sure that while we're investing in these areas, we're not necessarily also displacing people? So it's a combination of economic development, transportation infrastructure, housing needs, community safety, placemaking, which could be striping streets, making sure that people feel that they belong in an environment where they actually feel safe. Next slide. So during those 6 to 7 week period, we studied this particular area. We captured different things that are going on there at the moment, understanding that that's where we have to start. Because there was no area plan, there was no community plan. We wanted to do something quickly with the community. So it included taking inventory of what's there today, but also identifying the specific people that needed to be met with. So on the next slide, I identified different groups that we've met with during that period, business and property owners, community-based organizations, including some individuals, neighborhood residents. We also worked with Mecklenburg County, we worked with CMPD, we worked with our City of Charlotte Housing Department, fire, and different departments within the housing and neighborhood services, different departments within the city to really come together and say, all right, we identify this area. What then can we do in the next few months to begin to provide the platform for reinvestment in these areas that will also be sensitive to the needs of the people who live there and who do business there. So next slide, which is my last slide, identified certain projects. The ones that you see in asterisks are the ones that we feel we can move forward with quickly. To say that we're going to develop, take a look at stabilizing crime centers, centered or delinquent properties, creating a playbook. We had a meeting today between planning, economic development, housing and neighborhood services, Charlotte Department of Transportation, and our Constituent Services Office to identify, all right, what do we do now over the next few months? So what we want to do over the next few months is to take some of what we've had, plug them into what we call a playbook over the next several months that will identify, all right, how can we support some businesses in this area? How can we help to clean up some of these areas? How can we increase the use of business matching grants in this space? What are those opportunities for us to identify public space improvement? It is likely that at the end of the day, we may extend, this coverage area to include, Hidden Valley, the Rider, just to make sure that we look along that corridor and do something that could be unique, because that's a very important corridor intersection that a lot of people travel through on a regular basis. So it's an ongoing effort. And between December and summer, we're going to definitely be meeting with Councilmember Johnson and stakeholders and residents and businesses to give us more information about what are the things that we can invest in on a short-term basis that could provide a platform for reinvestment in this area that will help us to achieve the goals and objectives of the corridors like we set out to. So once again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I will be glad to answer questions when we get to that point. Over back to you, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. Again, if you're just tuning in, we will have a question and answer session at the end. I've already received some questions via social media, so I look forward to getting those questions answered. The next person on the agenda is David Patine. He's the planning manager, and he's going to talk about our zoning process. Taiwo just spoke about how fast the city is growing. Well, that's especially true in District 4. So I look forward to your sharing information, Dave. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Appreciate you inviting us to take part in the town hall this evening. Thanks to everybody that's tuned in, taking time out of their evening to join us as well. I am Dave Penton. I'm the rezoning manager for the city of Charlotte. And I'm just going to kind of give you all an overview of our rezoning process. There's a slide that we have on here that also highlights the petitions active currently in District 4. We can certainly get into some of those questions either later on, or I can also follow up with folks directly if they have some specific things outside of this town hall this evening. So just to give everybody an overview, rezoning is just the general method for taking a zoning classification that exists on a piece of property and changing that to another zoning classification. We have two types of rezoning processes in the city. One is a conventional process. That's just when you're going from one zoning district straight to another. There's no conditional site plan or other conditions for council to consider or approve. It's just basically going straight by the ordinance to change the zoning and potentially develop some property. The conditional process is one that includes site plans and community meetings, potential optional amendments, and other involvement by staff, the general community, the petitioner, and all the folks that would be involved in submitting and processing a petition. So typically we get applications from property owners, from developers or business owners that really want to use the property they have in a different way than the current zoning would allow. Next slide. So how can you identify what's a conventional versus conditional when you see things on the website or you get a letter in the mail? Basically, if you just see a letter followed by a number, like we have on the left, R4, R17, or TODCC, all of those are conventional. What marks out a conditional is if you see something in parentheses after those letter number combinations like CD or an O or an SPA. Those are all conditional processes that involve a site plan and a required community meeting. And so those are a little bit more in depth and in detail than just the conventional process. The 4 districts down at the bottom are conventional and are conditional, in nature. So even though they don't have a CD next to them, if you see NS, CC, or Research 3 or MX, those are all conditional regardless if it has that information in parentheses after it. So next slide. So when we go through the process, there's different groups of participants that are involved throughout. You have the applicant team or the petitioner, I said earlier, usually the property owner, somebody that has interest in developing the property, or the business owner. There's typically an agent involved. A lot of property owners or developers will bring an agent to help them walk through the process and get them through the process. And then we also have designers who submit the plans and draw them up for us. And then the property owner, who at the end of the day is the one signing off on either themselves or somebody representing them changing the zoning on their property. From the city staff side, this is just a general overview, but really the main players are planning, which is the group that I lead and I'm part of. And then we have CDOT, which is Charlotte Department of Transportation. They look at all the traffic and transportation items. We have stormwater, fire, park and rec. The county side does look at applications as well. And then we have other groups as needed. We might have folks in an engineering department or other city departments that take a look at the CMS is involved to now do an analysis of school capacity. So we have other groups that are also involved. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. And then, of course, we have the public, which are the property owners in the area, the residents that live in the area, like everyone out here watching in District 4, other business owners who might own property, other institutions such as schools and churches. And then we have the planning commission that's involved, and really their role is to select members of the full commission that represent, there's 7 folks on the zoning committee, and they go through each month and consider petitions that have their review after a public hearing and give a recommendation back to city council, who is the final participant on this slide. So city council starts things off with a public hearing, and then they end things the next month on some of those petitions with a decision. So the zoning committee kind of fits in there in between. So those are the general participants in the process. Next slide. So when we go through with the applicant team, they're the ones that submit the petition. They make the revisions based on input from staff, based on input from the community meeting. They also are the ones that make the case for why they feel like their project is something that should be approved and moved forward. So that's just, what their role is in the process. Next slide. City staff, what we do is we basically administer the entire process. We provide requested information to the community. So things like, what are the current plans for the area? What are some of the traffic and, related information for the area? What's general zoning around the other properties, and just other questions that the community may have. That's what staff is there to provide that information back. We also do an analysis of all the petitions and provide our feedback to the petitioner team. So if we see things that need to be corrected or fixed or better addressed, we let them know. And then we also provide city council and zoning committee with our professional recommendations. And all that's based on adopted policies like our area plans, things like the Charlotte Bikes policy that's been adopted, how are bike lanes being incorporated into projects, other things. If we get into more detail in these corridors of opportunity, as Ty was mentioning, how does that fold into how we analyze a rezoning petition? So there's a lot of different policies across the board that we look at to provide our recommendation back to council as to why a petition does or doesn't have merits. Next slide. And then the zoning committee, as I mentioned, they participate in the public hearings with city council. They also have their own meeting 2 weeks later. And essentially what their role is to look at it from a citizen group perspective and give an idea of what their recommendation may be as a body to the city council. So then both the staff and the zoning committee at the end of the process both make a recommendation to city council, and then city council is the one that makes that ultimate decision. They consider things like the public hearing, all the staff analysis and input that was provided. They also consider public input. And then the zoning committee recommendation on that request. And then again, they have the final say and outcome on a rezoning petition. Next slide. And then, of course, we have the public who's involved as well. Those are the area property owners, residents that live in the general area, business owners, institutions, as we mentioned. So property owners and the public are involved. They also get a chance to review the petition as it comes in, and we post things on our website, rezoning.org. If it's a conditional rezoning request, like we talked about earlier, there's a community meeting that folks can participate in. And they can also contact the petitioner and their agent directly to discuss those concerns or questions or other comments they might have. They can contact us as a staff with any questions about a petition. They can also speak at a public hearing and let zoning committee know of their position or concerns or support. And they can also attend those work sessions that zoning committee has, as well as council decisions, council public hearings. So the public has a chance to get involved and stay involved through pretty much the entire process, but those real key opportunities are the community meetings, and then of course the public hearings, which is really the opportunity to speak in front of council. But at any point, you can contact your council representative, you can contact your zoning committee members, and you can contact staff or the petitioner to ask questions and raise any points of concern or points of support if you'd like. So next slide. So the process that we have for a rezoning takes about 4 to 6 months. It starts out with a required pre-submittal meeting. So before anyone can even submit an application for us to start looking at, they have to have a meeting with staff to just kind of propose what their thinking is on a project, and we give them some feedback and guidance, and then they're able to submit an application within 6 months of that meeting. And so once that comes in, we go through a process to review the application, make sure it's complete. One of the things we do right out of the gates when that application comes in and that end of month deadline passes, we send out a notification or a courtesy notice. And that's really just a heads up to folks that live in the area that a petition's been filed. And so that's given everybody a good 2 to 3 month lead time to let you know, just to keep an eye out for things like other letters about community meetings or other letters about public hearings, and just let you know the process has started. And then, of course, we go through the general staff support on a petition, which involves site plan review, involves us coordinating with other departments and general public and the petitioner to really walk through, what we need to have fixed on the conditional plan if we have one of those. And then we go through our staff analysis and we get that prepared for the public hearing. And then we go through that staff analysis on a couple different occasions with zoning committee, and then again with city council at the decision time. So, but again, it all starts with that pre-sub meeting and that early citizen notification. During that process, and we'll get to this on the next slide, there's other points where we notify folks about upcoming meetings and public hearings. So if we go to that next slide, we can jump into citizen notification. So how we identify and notify folks about a rezoning, like I mentioned, that courtesy notice is the first step for us. Shortly after that, we also request that our partners in Charlotte DOT put up signs that you'll see. A lot of you are very familiar with those, bright yellow signs with a blue Z on them, letting you know that there's a petition that's been filed. They typically have the petition number. You can then go online and look that petition number up on rezoning.org, or you can contact staff and say, hey, I saw a sign with this number. What does that mean? And we can give you some info on that. Community meeting notices, if it's a conditional petition that involves a site plan and that required meeting, those come from the petitioner. So we create a mailing list that we use and we share with the petitioner. So it's the same one throughout the process. And they have to send out a notification for a community meeting, and that has to follow state law guidelines, just as we have to follow state law guidelines when we send out a mailed notice, which tells you when the public hearing is going to be. So once we get to a point, 3 or 4 months down the road after an application is submitted, we have a public hearing scheduled. We put a legal ad in the newspaper. Part of that next step is then us also saying, okay, the date's been set. We need to then send out a final notice to residents. Those typically come out about 2 weeks before the meeting. So they do give you a little bit of lead time so you know when that meeting is coming up. We can't mail those out any sooner than 25 days before a meeting. So that's why they come a little bit closer to that final date. So we have to get those to you within 10 days of the meeting or no more than 25 days. So that's our timeline to get you those notices to say, hey, the public hearing's been scheduled. This is how you can participate and how you can appear in front of council. So that's how we go through our citizen notification process. Next slide. So District 4, as we alluded to earlier, has been very active in the rezoning process. A lot of changes over the last few years, of course, and this year has been no different. We've got about 20 active petitions. You can see some of those are a little bit older at the top of the list with the 2005 and 2007. A lot of those are likely have been deferred for so long, they probably just never were withdrawn. So we have some of those that sit out there and they never get withdrawn by the petitioner. So the real active ones are those 2021 or the 2020 ones. And so we have about 15 to 16 of those. And we just have a list there of what the classification is, and then what they're going to is that final column there on the right. So as we said, there's quite a few out there. I know there's a few on this list that have already garnered some attention from folks at different points of the process. We can certainly talk about some of those later during the Q&A, but it may also be beneficial if we have some specific questions. Happy to share my contact info and have some just one-on-one conversations or small group conversations as a follow-up offline, so we can let other folks ask other participants on the panel some of those questions at the end. So if you do have specific petitions you want to talk about, we can certainly, like I said, get into some of those, but also happy to follow up and take some additional time that we may need. Next slide. So how you can participate really in this process as citizens, I know that's one of the questions we always get, and frankly, it's one of the things we're working to continue to improve. Citizen notification, really the first step is to attend that community meeting. If you get a notice from a petitioner saying, hey, we're having a community meeting, a lot of those, of course, through COVID and the pandemic have all gone virtual to calls just like this. And so you can participate just from your home. You don't have to worry about trying to get somewhere after work. You can just log onto your computer and take part in those virtual dialogues with the petitioner. So certainly I encourage anybody to attend those when you get a letter about them. Or if you get a neighbor that says, hey, I've got this community meeting and you didn't get a letter, still try to get a hold of the petitioner and get that link so you can participate as well. Just because you're not invited doesn't mean you can't participate. So certainly encourage everybody to do that. That's really the first step. And that's really one of the best ways to have a direct conversation with the petitioner about the project. Staff is here to provide support and information. We are generally a neutral party in these. We try to facilitate conversations between the petitioner and the community as much as we can. So a lot of times we'll take questions and work with the petitioner to get them addressed, or work directly between both parties to try and get some things ironed out or worked through. And of course, as you go through, you can look at site plans and other reviews and other commitments that you may have wanted to see on the plan, make sure that they get incorporated. And you can follow all of these on our website and go through that process. Each petition has its own website, so you can go through and figure out what or find out what the latest information is on those. We update those every few weeks. We get new information in, so that's one great way to stay on top of that. Next slide. And then, of course, step 4, we mentioned earlier, attend a public hearing. We're, of course, doing those virtually as well at the moment. So look forward to being able to get back into council chambers and having those in person. But for now, we're doing those virtually. We have different ways now. You can sign up with the clerk's office. All of that, again, is on our website, rezoning.org. We also send out that information now on the virtual meetings and the public hearing notices. So we provide that info as best as we can to you guys, both online and in those mailed notices to let you know how you can attend those public hearings and speak in front of council. And then, of course, you can always communicate with the zoning committee. All of their contact information is on our planning department page. They all have their emails there. You can email them individually or as a group. Certainly encourage anybody to take advantage and do that. Their meetings are not public hearings. They usually don't get public comment, but they certainly are open to the public, and you certainly can communicate with them prior to those meetings, so you can at least let them know what your viewpoints are. So those are the best ways to get involved and stay involved. Like I said, we're trying to work through some different ways to enhance the community engagement process. We presented some general ideas back at the end of October to a council committee, and we're continuing to work through those, and hopefully we'll have some new ways to engage the public getting into the new year. So look forward to hopefully rolling some of those out here soon and getting some more meaningful dialogue and input from the citizen groups that we work with in our community. So I think that's the last slide I've got. So I'll save things for questions to the end, and certainly appreciate everybody's time. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave Hecton. Sorry to mispronounce your name.
Oh, that's okay. Happens all the time.
I've been doing it for years, so I apologize.
No worries at all.
The next on the agenda, we have someone from CDOT, but before we move on, if I can ask that Dave's information is shared in the comments, along with my email address and city phone number in the comments, as well as the email I think Dave referred to for the zoning committee. And we'll talk more about that during questions and answers. Okay, next on the agenda is Charlotte Department of Transportation to talk about the sidewalk and pedestrian safety.
Can you hear me now? Can you all hear me?
Great, thank you.
Can you hear me, council member?
I can hear you. Is this Vivian?
You can. Fantastic. Sorry for the technological blitz.
Thank you.
So I'm glad you can all hear me. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for having us out tonight, and wanted to thank all those on the call tonight for coming out on a Tuesday night and learning quite a few things. Been a lot of great information this evening. Wanted to really spend some time tonight talking about the sidewalk and a pedestrian safety program that CDOT manages, and we'll go to the next slide. There is a lot baked into this, and in 2017, the city adopted the Charlotte Walks Plan, which is the city's first pedestrian plan. It's actually won an award through the NCAPA, the American Planners Association, which is great news for us. Charlotte is becoming more and more recognized nationally for its programs in biking and walking, and moving forward better pedestrian connectivity and bike connectivity throughout our city. So there's a huge amount of policy foundation behind this, and a lot of this goes back to the Transportation Action Plan, the very first plan that was adopted back, in 2005 or 6. Building upon that, the Charlotte Walks Plan outlines a strategy for building a better walking environment for our residents. The Vision Zero Action Plan is another action plan that the citizens on the call tonight might want to have a look at, and it aims to reduce fatalities and severe injuries to zero in terms of crashes over time, and that is a big goal of our city council now. The Future Strategic Mobility Plan, Ty spoke up quite a bit this evening and is talking about Charlotte Moves and the future of our transportation system. Next slide. So in Charlotte Walks, there's a vision statement that really is building a city that's more walkable for everyone, and following in 3 primary characteristics of what that great walk looks like. It's safe, so we're building a lot of sidewalks with planting strips, so you're not right up against the street. It's useful. It gets us to places we want to walk to, like the grocery store and schools and the greenways, retail shops. And it's inviting, so that walk is one you want to take. There are areas of our city where the walk is not as pleasant as other areas. And so the idea here is that through Charlotte Walks and through the time we spend in building a better walking environment, we're building better streets overall in our city and making that happen over bond cycles and over the time frame that we move forward to build a better walking environment. Next slide. So the mission of the Sidewalk and Pedestrian Safety Program, which is a bond-funded program through the City Council and Bond Initiative, is to make Charlotte a more walkable city. And we're spending a lot of our dollars on that by constructing new sidewalks through this particular program, which is it's funded in the 2018 bond at $30 million. But a big piece of this is to add pedestrian crossings, because for some time, this particular program that the city manages only built the sidewalks, but we weren't looking so much at where are the transit crossings, where are the big crossings where pedestrians are trying to cross a thoroughfare and need that pedestrian refuge island in the center of the roadway, or perhaps need a traffic signal or a pedestrian crossing signal. So we're spending a fair amount of the funds on those types of improvements as well. So it's not just walking along the street, it's walking across the street. Next slide. And so through the pedestrian program, we have built 100 miles of sidewalk since 2002. And we've had a number of staff members very proud of this mileage that we've done. But it's not just the pedestrian program that's building that mileage. There are private developers that are building a lot of our sidewalks throughout their new developments and retrofit developments. There are certain city programs through other bond initiatives, such as the Neighborhood Improvement Program. So it's not just the sidewalk program that builds these sidewalks, but it comes in a number of different ways. So just wanted to point that out, that it's not just this program, but the city is working in different fashion for the program to, the sidewalks to be built. And private developers do build a fair share of that. So wanted to commend our development community out there as well. Next slide. Just wanted to give you some stats and show you a map of the city of Charlotte. In blue, you see missing sidewalk along thoroughfares. So just a little history here. For roughly 50 years, we built streets without sidewalks. And after World War II, we spent a fair amount of time building streets, but with the autocentric kind of nature post-World War II, we didn't build sidewalks on many of our streets. And that's why we have the program we have today, because we're playing catch-up. And this catch-up is going to take a long time to get us to a place where we will have sidewalks on most of our streets. Just with the stats here, thoroughfares, there are 630 miles, and those thoroughfares with sidewalk present on at least one side is 452 miles. So if you look at the network, 72% of our network is complete with a sidewalk at least on one side of a thoroughfare, which provides for some safety. Those thoroughfares that have sidewalks on both sides are 57%. So we still have a long way to go. I mentioned the $30 million 2018 bond, and to retrofit a sidewalk in current dollars today, it costs us roughly $1.8 to $2 million a mile. A lot of this is due to real estate and the right-of-way that the city needs to obtain. The construction itself is a lot, but there are a lot of pieces to this that make this mileage a bit more expensive than doing it right up front when we build a street initially. So if we were to build a sidewalk with the street now, it would be a much less number. Next slide. So in the plan, Charlotte Walks and City Council adopted sidewalk policy. There are 4 major categories of how we build sidewalks within this particular program again, and I'm focused on this program, but again, there are other ways that we get sidewalks through, as I mentioned, private developers, building, and then other city programs. So this particular program looks at major sidewalk projects, and we do a ranking, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also are doing a lot of the pedestrian safety crossing projects now. There is a committee that the city has, an internal committee that reviews requests by residents and external agencies that request crossings. And they're determining whether or not the crossing would be funded, would be approved. And it's based on a number of things where we do fund our crossings. And part of this is the high injury network, where we're finding that there are more crashes, additional crashes on thoroughfares, proximity to schools, transit, and those uses where we expect pedestrians to be also guide some of that criteria. The third bucket of the ped safety program are minor gaps in these short segments where we could actually build a project for roughly $100,000. And so the committee also looks at those type of projects and ADA projects. We do spend some of our funds retrofitting accessible ramps to make them ADA compliant, some sidewalks to make them ADA compliant, and occasionally a special project will come along where we're connecting to a greenway, City Council is looking to do something, the Director of Transportation has authorized a small project, so those kinds of things. So you see the 4 buckets here, and this is where that money is spent with this particular program. Next slide. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the coordination with County Greenways, and Ty mentioned the Cross Charlotte Trail is part of that greenway system. Cross Charlotte is a 26-mile trail that will cross the city from the northeast to the southwest. About 13, 14 miles of that is built at this point. It is a 26-mile trail. And just wanted to provide some of the stats here with the coordination with County Greenways. There are 55 miles of existing greenway now. 30 miles of new greenways will be built between 2019 last year and 2023. So there is a lot in the hopper that the city is doing and that the county is doing, and we're really excited about a lot of that. So we just wanted to share this map. 67 active bike and ped projects near the greenway corridors. So this whole idea of coordinating with greenways is to provide the connectivity that the city needs and our residents need to get to our greenways and provide for greenways as a transportation corridor and not just a recreational facility. And that's what the Cross Charlotte Trail is intended to do, is act for those two types of uses. Next slide. So the sidewalk installation policy was adopted by the City Council years ago, and it's been amended from time to time. The current policy, most recent policy, was adopted in 2018, and its goal is to retroactively install sidewalks on existing streets that never had a sidewalk before. So the number of miles built, it's really limited to the available funds, and looking again at that 2018 bond, we have roughly $30 million and it's $2 million a mile, so we are hopeful we'll get 15 miles out of that bond. So that policy will install sidewalks on both sides of all thoroughfares, because we feel that with the higher volumes and the higher speeds on thoroughfares, it's very important for us to provide safety on both sides, and also to provide those crossing opportunities for people to get across safely and provide transit opportunities, because if you're getting off the bus on one side, you've got to cross back to get your bus on the other side. But we're also prioritizing requests using a ranking criteria, which I'll talk about. Next slide. So just wanted to give you an idea of what the policy looks like in terms of how we rank things. And so there are points assigned for the examples that I'm sharing here, focusing on safety, number one, the high injury network, and where there have been crashes or persons hit and or killed. So points are awarded where we have areas where those are higher in nature. Safety is very important. So where we have poor visibility, where we have higher traffic volumes, higher speeds. So looking at that traffic is critical. The proximity to land uses, and so schools get a fair amount of points, transit stops, parks and greenways, and neighborhood serving land uses, such as Cotswold, or looking at South Park, looking at malls and things like that, retail areas. Percent of households without access to a vehicle, so that gets points as well, because those are areas where we feel that persons will need to walk more, that they might not have access to the car, so they're taking transit or they're walking for their trips. The non-thoroughfare streets we'll talk about in a minute are a little bit different in that the local streets, and I live on a local street, would require a nomination form to actually be ranked into the process. The thoroughfares are all ranked in the ranking system where we don't have sidewalks, again, because the thoroughfares have the highest volumes, the highest speeds. So most of the money most of the bond money is spent on the thoroughfares, and a small amount of the money is spent on non-thoroughfare streets because of the lower speeds and the lower volumes. Next slide. So there's a lot in this slide, and I won't read every word, but I just wanted to show you that the chart that we look at in terms of the policy and then the public engagement process, because there's a substantial public engagement process in this, and I will say that anyone who's on the call tonight and has a street without a sidewalk, and you have interest in learning how that would rank or how that would fall into the ranking process, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk you through that. But the thoroughfares generally don't require any kind of nomination form. And so a long time ago, it only took one person to request a sidewalk on a local street. And what we found was that the public wanted to be much more engaged in that process to determine the side of the street whether they really wanted a sidewalk on their street or not, because there are a lot of implications to putting the sidewalk on the ground and putting it in front of a person's home. Trees may be in the way, there might be retaining walls needed, we might need to purchase land from the landowner. So there's a lot baked into the process of planning the sidewalks on local streets and thoroughfare streets, and then implementing them. So the thoroughfares where we feel we need to build the sidewalks because of higher volumes and higher speeds, there's no nomination form. There is a public engagement process, so the public can see how the planning's going, what the plan looks like. We can work with the public on what the design looks like. But the non-thoroughfares or the local streets, where we have far fewer traffic trips and the speeds are lower, we require a nomination form with signatures from at least 25% of property owners on both sides of the street. When that's submitted, then the property owners the city will evaluate the sidewalk request and put it on a ranking list. Once the project is nominated, it's ranked, and then as it moves up the list, the top few each year in the non-thoroughfare category, the local street category, would go through a petition process, a second round, if you will, to confirm that the public on that street indeed still wants a sidewalk on their street and that they're willing to have that the city move through on that process. So a petition would be submitted with signatures from at least 60% of the property owners on both sides of the street. And if that's submitted, then we get into a place where the sidewalk is ranked, and then when funding becomes available, we move forward on that particular local street sidewalk. Next slide. So the sidewalk program does a lot of great things for pedestrians in our city. And I've been a part of this with CDOT for close to 17 years in various capacities. And the city's doing a lot of great work, but kind of going back to the post-World War II days, for 50 years, we didn't build sidewalks. So there's a long way to go, but we are making every effort as a city and as city staff to use money to the best ability we can to make the mileage go the furthest. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions, and I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Vivian, and thank you to all of you. That is the end of our presentation. We'll go on to question and answers. We are running a few minutes behind due to technical difficulties, and we have quite a few questions. So I'm hoping to get to every question, but I want to make sure that we have contact information in the comments. For my contact information, for Dave Pettin's contact information. Vivian, who should a resident contact if they want to request a sidewalk in their district?
So you can reach out to 311, and then we will have that actually documented. So that's the best way to do that, and then we have a record of it, and we will get in touch with you. You'll get your email address on there. My staff will contact the residents, and then we'll get the process going.
Okay, thank you. Major Foley, one of the things that you all advised during our October 15th meeting regarding the drag racing is that individuals reach out to their precinct community coordinator. Can you share how they would find that information for their specific?
Yes, ma'am. Our website, cmpd.org, is by far the easiest way to do that. We also have the CMPD app now that's available for both iOS, for Apple devices, and for Android. That's another way that they can go ahead and provide that information to us. The majority of folks who are in District 4 live in the University City Division. So our office is located across from the hospital, if you will, right off of W.T. Harris and North Tryon Street. In February, thanks to the good graces of council, we'll be moving into a new facility on North Tryon Street, and we're very excited and looking forward to that. So if you'd like to contact us, again, cmpd.org is the way to go. Look for our divisions, our districts, and then pick University City Division. You'll find the contact information for the captain, who is Luke Sell, and both of his lieutenants. and then we'll be glad to recontact you to provide you any information that we can about your inquiry.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Speaking of the University City Police Department, that is our first question. And the question is actually what are City Council's plans to increase the University City Police Division to accommodate the additional development? That's a great question. And as I stated, City Council supports CMPD. If there were a recommendation for funding, we've not seen that request. Can you share from the CMPD perspective what the plan is to increase staffing, Major Foley?
Chief Jennings has been very vocal about our desire to reach our allocated staffing strength, and due to many reasons, we're just really striving to find people who want to wear this badge. Part of being able to get officers on the street is making sure that we incentivize the job, that we reach out to people in our communities that want to serve, that want to represent their communities, and want to be a part of our organization. That's a long-term investment. It takes money to be able to take a person from being a citizen and putting a badge on them to make an officer. So there's a long-term commitment to that. Part of council's work is to make sure that CMPD is funded to fill allocations, and then we have to go out and make sure that we find the people to fill those spots. We do that through recruiting. We do that through local colleges. We do that through the military. We do that through campaigns that we have here locally. So again, support is broad-based. It has to be across the community. The chief always says, be part of this conversation. If you feel like you want to influence how policing is done in your communities, you've got to engage with us. A great way to do that is make a career. Come be an officer. We need people. So from a support perspective, we continue to ask council to help us on the infrastructure side of the house to make sure that we have the facilities, we have adequate facilities for people, that we have the equipment to do the job, that we have the technology to help us advance what we do. And then fundamentally, it is about people. So we want to make sure that we have enough folks who are going to be able to wear the blue and stay with us and do a great job for years, because it really is a calling and it's a fantastic career. I'm just telling you, it's a great job. So again, if you'd like to talk with us about that, cmpd.org also has a recruiting tab, and you can check on that box. If you know somebody, a young person that you think would be a great candidate as an officer, highly encourage you to reach out to us so that we can communicate with them.
Thank you for saying that. So as stated, there will be a new facility in the university area in February.
We're excited about that.
We're excited too. We've approved equipment and the allocation for staffing. So the primary issue right now is the recruitment piece. So anyone on the call or listening, if you are interested or you know someone who might be interested, please share the need. The CMPD is recruiting some good folks. So thank you for that. I have another question for you, Major Foley.
I'm awfully popular tonight for some strange reason.
485 racing has become an issue again. What's been done to stop the illegal street racing? This person might have signed on late, but if you could just give a brief overview again on what the public can do to report it or what we're doing.
I'd be glad to. So for about the last 60 days, CMPD, in concert with other local and regional law enforcement partners, have been conducting operations throughout Charlotte-Mecklenburg, especially around the 485 corridor, to address the complaints that we have about the car culture. I'll be quite honest with you, COVID, I think, is partly to blame for this, because people can't go out and socialize at places they normally would. So they get in their cars and they go out and they drive and they go places together. Unfortunately, people aren't using good judgment. And so what they're doing is they are going out onto major highways. They go out to places, especially at night when they think there aren't going to be any motorists out there. Then they go out and they have this kind of activity. We're all about safety. We're not here to tell people that you can't get together. with all due respect to the governor and all the regulations that we have to make sure that you have good social distancing. But, if you're going to go out here and drive your car, if you want to show your car, if you want to show the time and investment money you put into it, that's great. But don't go out there and go crazy on our streets. We've taken significant enforcement action. We've issued nearly 2,600 citations in the last 60 days. We've been getting a lot of input from the public. We get that through the CMPD app. You can also call 911 when you hear things happening. Please understand, for those of you that call 911, when you hear something, you hear a loud engine and you hear cars racing. If you can't give us an exact location, try to be as specific as you can and know that by the time we get there, depending on what our calls for service are, where officers are coming from, those cars may be miles down the road from where they were when you first heard that noise. So we understand the frustration of the public when we try to address some of these issues, when they hear the screeching of tires and they call the police. And we get there and those cars may be gone. However, if it's a recurring issue and we know, for example, that they're there at the same time every Saturday night, that makes it a little bit more workable for us to be able to go out there and address these issues with the motoring public. So again, we're looking for compliance. We want people to be safe. We obviously want to address the complaints that we get. I live in Charlotte. I live in a community where that kind of activity goes on in my neighborhood and outside of my neighborhood. I hear it as well. And so I have to deal with that and call it in and address it just like any other citizen would. So we're very attentive to that. And again, I appreciate the public's interest in that. We will be conducting more operations throughout this month to ensure that that kind of activity, that we mitigate that and try and prevent that from happening.
Okay, thank you. We do have quite a few questions regarding zoning. And we've got some questions regarding a specific zoning, and that's 2020-122. So I'm going to recommend that they reach out to you specifically, Dave. I'll do some high-level questions, but the 2020-122, you'll be getting some. We want to make sure we have your contact information in the comments. There is a question at a high level for Taiwo. When Dave talked about the rezoning process, he mentioned the area plan. We know that many of our zoning petitions and the recommendations are inconsistent with the area plan due to the age of the area plan and the growth in our city. So how are we ensuring that the rezonings are aligned with the future strategies for the city, Taiwo?
Thank you. So we're working on a Charlotte Future 2040 comprehensive plan right now, which will, in essence, override what we talk about as the growth framework and general development policies by providing some umbrella policies for how we respond to growth. But the rezone is usually, not only do they reference the growth framework and general development policies, but they also reference area plans. And we have about 96 or so area plans right now. Some of them are outdated. There are a couple of them in the University City area, obviously, that are 2015, 2016, about 5 years old. That's the Prosperity Hawks. But even in the planning world, 5 years is not a very, it's not recent. It's like a long time ago, especially in a very fast growing community. So as we work on the comprehensive plan, once it's adopted in April by council, we'll begin what we call place types mapping of the city. And then we eventually will finish revising our Unified Development Ordinance with an updated zoning ordinance by September of 2021, which will be adopted also by council. In the meantime, though, we have to be doing business as usual, which is really to review rezoning petitions in line with consistency or inconsistency with the existing area plans. When we have the comprehensive plan in place, we will be looking at that to be an umbrella guide for us as well in areas where certain, there's an inconsistency in terms of area plan and rezoning petition, but where that comprehensive plan may have the type of policy or guidance that will help us make a better decision than where we have today. So until then, until April, we'll continue to do business as usual. And over time, we will replace some of those area plans, 96 of them, we'll replace them with about 15 different community area plans all throughout the city. But that time may not be next year. That could actually be a longer time. But right now, the comprehensive plan will help us take that responsibility by early next year.
Okay. And what is the city doing to increase the infrastructure to accommodate all of the growth in future growth?
That's definitely a very tough one. Like you've seen from my colleagues today, especially the presentation by Vivian, we have plans in place. We have plans in place to put this infrastructure, whether they be biking related or walking related or transit related or water related or even solid waste and all of that. The challenge is money. But Charlotte has been a very responsive city, supporting transportation bonds, housing bonds over the last many years. What we're talking about with regards to Charlotte moves is that if we were to put a referendum on the ballot in 2021 fall and we end up, succeeding, and we have an infusion of $4 to $6 billion in local contribution to the intent of our strategic mobility plan, it helps us to be able to build new street connections. It helps us to be able to build bike lanes in safe areas. It helps us to be able to meet the gaps in our sidewalks. It helps us also to be able to improve congestions at certain intersections. So while we have the plan in place, funding is always a challenge, and the way we continue to do it incrementally won't get us there. But if we want to do something transformational, then that's when we begin to say that infrastructure will begin to be, to help us manage our growth properly.
If the referendum doesn't pass, is there an alternative funding option for the comprehensive plan?
We probably will have to. Right now, we do a capital improvement program, or CIP. We do that every other year. It's about $50 million or so every other year. One of the things that may be a backup plan for us is to do a huge increase in that, maybe $200 to $300 million. That will result in maybe a slight increase in property tax, maybe less than 1 cent a year. That will help us to be able to do that. But outside of a referendum, that's the only other way that we can do something transformational with our infrastructure.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of questions. We probably won't get to all of the questions. I want to make sure that the contact information is in the comments so that you can reach out to the appropriate party if we don't get to your question. Dave, this is for you. These are some questions. What is the best way for residents to show their support or disapproval for a petition impacting the area they live? You've discussed that. Individuals can go back and rewind and listen to the video again. We want to make sure that the link to the city clerk is in the comments so that individuals know how to sign up to speak. Is there anything you want to add to that, Dave?
I would definitely say it's in the virtual side of things right now where we are with meetings and not being able to go in council chambers and have signs or wear similar colored shirts to show unified opposition or support. Emails to the clerk's office so they can be routed to all those council members is a great way to do it. Online petitions are also a really good way to show visibly a number of signatures for a petition, whether it's in favor or against. Certainly at least gets that message across that there's a large amount of people that are have a certain shared viewpoint. So those can be shared with the clerk's office as well. We've gotten quite a few of those throughout the last few months going virtual. So those are some ways I think that can show unification and show a common voice, whether that's supporting or opposing a petition outside of actually being physically present in council chambers until we get back to that ability.
How is the 300 feet rule determined for the notices to the neighbors?
So that's a good question. The 300 feet rule was a council policy. The state really is pretty minimal. The state only requires us to notify adjacent property owners. So those are just properties that are right next door or share a property line. Of course, that's in a lot of cases, that's only 2 or 3 properties perhaps. So at some point, I don't know when, the city council adopted a policy to go above and beyond the state requirement and implement a 300-foot radius from a subject property. So that's a policy that council adopted, and like I said, it goes above and beyond the state requirements. But that's why we're also trying to enhance how we engage with the general community. Do we use more social media like Nextdoor or other things where we can capture more people than just that 300 feet? Because obviously, rezoning petition does impact more than that, small radius. But as far as notices and mailed notices, that was what was decided on. But I'm hoping that we can find a way to capture more folks in some type of notification that doesn't involve us taking on more cost and paper to actually physically mail things. So that's what we're working on now, and hopefully we can get outside of just doing that 300-foot target.
That would be great. And speaking of the notice to the neighbors for the community meeting, when is that community meeting held? Is there a time frame? Because I do have a question regarding that process.
So the suggested timeline for a community meeting is to have it within, I think, 60 days after the petition is filed. It's not an ordinance requirement. Sometimes they happen sooner. Sometimes, depending on how things progress, they may happen later. There may be, more than one. They're only required to have one, but sometimes they hold multiple just because, the project changes and, goes through some transformations. But we typically like them to have that within 60 days of submitting the application. It has to be held at least a month before the public hearing. So, they have to at least have that in place and done, and a report submitted to us within a month prior to it being eligible for a hearing.
Okay. Let's see. I love the 12 feet multi-use pathways. Are we starting to see? Where are they required? Or are they new standard for thoroughfares?
I think that would probably be Vivian.
Yeah, I'll give that a go. Yeah, so this kind of gets back to something that we call the future streets map. That's a piece of this puzzle. And the streets map is being crafted by city staff now as part of the overall UDO work going on. The streets map is determining the space needed for lanes, sidewalks, bike facilities, and also determines what kind of facilities. So you are seeing some more multi-use paths on thoroughfares. And again, this gets back to that idea that with higher speeds and higher volume streets, we want greater distance for pedestrians away from that street. And we're also looking at areas where we can provide a wider sidewalk that can accommodate both bikes and pedestrians in the same space, so that we don't have to build also a bike lane on the street where the vehicle lanes are. So it takes cyclists away from that higher volume, higher speed traffic in some areas. Now, there are other areas of town.
Vivian, I'm sorry. We've got
Yeah.
1 minute left. I want to be respectful of the time.
Oh,
Is there a website that they can go check out these plans for the sidewalks and the 12 feet pathways?
yes, I have to get that for you. I'll put it in the chat in just a minute.
Okay, and hopefully we can upload that into the YouTube comments and Facebook. Thank you.
That'd be great. You're welcome.
I want to thank you all for participation. I want to thank the residents who were online and participating. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions. You have all of our contact information, and please feel free to reach out. I want to thank Vivian Coleman, Wendy Bing, Kathy Dennis, Major Foley, Dave Petton, David Flowers, Donata Jackson, Taiwo Jahobi, and Latoya White. Thank you all. And you have my information. Please feel free to reach out to any of us anytime. And happy holidays, and stay safe and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.